Welcome to the deep dive. So, millions of people, right? All over the world, they're starting to learn English. And you can see why it opens doors. New jobs, travel, cultures, just growth. It's a big goal.
But absolutely a powerful one.
But look, anyone who's tried knows it can feel, well, pretty daunting. Especially right at the beginning. So many ways to go, so much advice, and honestly, some really common traps people fall into.
That's right. It's a huge landscape, language learning. And it's incredibly easy for beginners especially to sort of stumble into these patterns that, well, they slow you down
Yeah.
or just lead to frustration. We saw that again and again in the sources we looked at for this deep dive, these pitfalls. They're almost universal for newcomers.
Exactly. So that's our mission today. We've been digging through all this material, these expert sources, and we want to lay out the top 5 mistakes beginners often make. But more than that, how you can actually get around them.
The how to avoid it part is key.
Right. Think of this as like a clear map to navigate those early stages. We're not just pointing out the problems, we're explaining why they're problems based on the research and giving you real alternatives from the advice we reviewed. Ready?
Let's do it.
Okay, so diving into the sources, the very first big hurdle, the one beginners often hit and just get completely stuck on, it's this like obsessive focus on grammar rules right out of the gate.
The grammar trap.
Yeah. Now, grammar, okay, the sources all agree. It's fundamental. It's the skeleton of the language, as one put it. But what happens when you try to master every single rule before you even feel okay just stringing a few words together?
Well, what happens is you basically paralyze yourself.
Yeah.
Analysis paralysis, right?
Yeah.
If you're constantly checking every sentence in your head, is the tense right? Did I use the right article? Preposition? Okay. Before you even open your mouth, you just,
Yeah.
say nothing.
Right.
The sources really emphasize this. Language, its core purpose is communication. So if focusing intensely on perfect grammar stops you from actually using the language, well, it completely undermines the whole point.
Yeah.
You know about English? Maybe, but you can't use it.
And that's the key insight here, isn't it? The solution isn't ignore grammar forever. It's about shifting your initial focus.
Exactly.
Prioritize communication. The research suggests starting with useful phrases you can actually use immediately. Like, how are you? Can you help me? Stuff that allows for real basic interaction right away.
Yeah, and this is powerful because actually speaking, even just simple phrases, that's what builds your initial confidence, your momentum. And the sources point out that the grammar, it starts to develop much more naturally as you use the language more. As you hear structures, see them in context. It's like that bicycle analogy they use.
I like that one.
You don't need a physics lesson to learn to ride a bike, do you?
Yeah.
You get on and start pedaling.
Yeah.
You figure out the balance, the steering by doing it. Grammar's a bit like that.
So a practical tip that came up was using things like language apps, Duolingo, others like it. They kind of sneak the sentence structures in through repetition and context, not dry rules, or even just watching simple cartoons in English.
Yeah, things for kids often work well.
You absorb the patterns without feeling like you're drowning in a grammar book. And crucially, this was everywhere in the sources. You have to be okay with making mistakes.
Oh, absolutely essential.
They're not failures, they're just data,
Hmm.
how you learn. So don't let that fear of being imperfect stop you before you start.
And by making communication the goal early on, you kind of sidestep all that initial frustration. You get to the rewarding part, actually using English much, much sooner. It helps your brain focus on function first, form later.
Okay, moving on then. Another big area where beginners often trip up, according to the sources, neglecting listening practice.
Yes, very common.
People often focus a lot on reading and writing, right?
Yep.
Things that maybe feel a bit more controlled. But they don't spend enough time just listening.
And the research really shows why that's such a problem.
Yeah.
Listening isn't just, understanding the words. It's about training your ear to the actual sounds, the rhythm, the stress, the intonation, all the music of English, really.
Yeah, the music. A good way to put it.
And it's also how you get used to different accents, different speeds. If you don't practice listening enough, you can know loads of vocabulary, all the grammar rules. But when a native speaker talks normally, it might just sound like, well, noise, because your ear isn't trained to pick it apart quickly.
Right. And the sources also mention how English isn't just one thing, is it? British English, American, Australian, they all sound different.
Exactly.
And listening to lots of different sources helps you start to actually recognize and hopefully understand those variations.
So the solution's pretty clear. You need dedicated listening time. The sources say make it a non-negotiable, part of your routine, even if it's just in short bursts.
Yeah, like One great tip was starting with stuff that's made to be clearer or maybe a bit slower. Podcasts for learners, simple audiobooks.
Mm,
Those BBC Learning English videos are often good. They sometimes have transcripts too.
those resources are excellent, yeah.
They suggest even just 10, 15 minutes a day can make a huge difference. And you might not understand everything. That's okay. Your brain's still absorbing the sounds, the patterns, the flow.
Definitely. And a bonus tip they mentioned, try repeating what you hear. Just parrot it back. It helps connect the sound to actually making the sound yourself. Good for pronunciation.
So, focusing on listening, it directly helps you actually have conversations in the real world. It bridges that gap between reading English and understanding spoken English. They're surprisingly different skills.
Very different.
All right, mistake number 3 on our list. And this one is, well, it's a deep habit for a lot of learners. Translating everything. Word. For. Word. From your native language straight into English.
Ah, yes, the direct translation trap. It's so natural to try and use what you already know, your own language structure. But English, well, it doesn't just use different words. It often has completely different sentence structures, different ways of saying things. Idioms.
Can you give an example?
Sure, those sources had classic ones. Like, in many languages, you might say something that translates literally to, I have hunger. But in English, it's, I am hungry.
Right. Or, she has 20 years.
Exactly. Which in English becomes, she is 20 years old. If you translate directly like that, the result often sounds, well, unnatural, awkward, sometimes just plain wrong to a native speaker. It makes it harder for them to understand you clearly.
Okay, so what's the fix? The sources suggested consciously trying to start thinking in English, which sounds hard.
It does sound hard, but you start small. The idea is, instead of building your English sentences piece by translating, you learn common phrases as whole chunks, as complete units of meaning.
Like, nice to meet you.
Exactly. Nice to meet you. You don't break that down word by word, do you? You just learn it as the thing you say when you meet someone. Learning phrases like this helps train your brain to sort of absorb typical English patterns, the natural flow. Over time, you start bypassing your native language filter more.
Mm-hmm. Build thoughts directly in English.
That's the goal, yeah.
So a practical thing the material recommended was keeping a simple journal. Maybe just write a few sentences each day about your day, what you like, whatever. But, and this is the key part, try to write them directly in English first. Don't write them in your language and then translate.
Even if they're very simple sentences.
Right. Apparently, that simple practice is really effective at getting your brain used to forming thoughts the English way.
It really is. Focusing on thinking in English helps you sound more natural, and people will understand you much more easily. It's quite a fundamental shift, actually.
Okay, next up, mistake number 4. And this one's tied up with feelings for sure. It's actively avoiding speaking English because you're just terrified of making mistakes.
Oh, the fear factor. It's huge.
And it's understandable, right? Feeling vulnerable when you know you're not perfect.
Absolutely understandable. And the sources are really firm on this. It's a barrier you absolutely must push through. Look, the research shows native speakers. They really don't expect perfection from someone learning. They're usually just impressed you're making the effort to communicate in their language.
That's probably true.
And remember what we said earlier. Mistakes aren't failures. They are vital. They're how you learn, how you improve. If you wait until you think you can speak perfectly before you actually speak, well, you miss out on the most crucial practice there is. Real interaction. You'll just never start if you wait for perfection.
So the advice then is find ways to speak where the pressure isn't so high. Start small.
Exactly that. Find low-pressure environments. Language exchange apps came up a lot. Tandem, Hello Talk, ones like that. They connect you with other learners, so there's often a really supportive, understanding vibe. Everyone's in the same boat.
That makes sense.
Or, it might sound a bit funny, but talk to yourself.
Really?
Yeah, just narrate what you're doing. Okay, now I'm making coffee. Describe things around you. That's a blue car. It builds confidence using the language out loud, but with zero audience pressure.
Huh. Okay.
Yeah.
And setting tiny goals, like really tiny.
Yes. The sources suggested maybe committing to saying just one sentence in English each day to anyone, a friend, family, your language partner online. It could be super simple, like the example they gave. I like your shirt.
Just one sentence.
Just one. Small actions like that chip away at the fear. They build the habit of speaking.
So overcoming that fear, it seems like maybe the biggest key to actually making progress.
It's arguably the most critical step, yes. Speaking is where everything else was, the listening, the vocabulary, the grammar you have learned, it all comes together. And consistent practice, even if it's full of mistakes at first, that's the only way to get fluent and feel confident.
Okay, and finally, mistake number 5. This one often leads to people just giving up. It's expecting results too quickly.
The instant fluency myth.
Yeah, thinking you'll be fluent in like a few weeks, a couple months maybe.
And that expectation just sets you up for disappointment.
Hmm.
Because fundamentally, language learning, it's a long game. The sources really stress this. It is a marathon, not a sprint.
Right.
Building real skill takes time, significant time, and consistent effort. Over months, even years. There was one study mentioned that estimated reaching, say, a solid intermediate level in English might take somewhere around 600 to 750 hours of actual study.
Wow, that's a lot of hours.
It is. And of course, that number varies wildly depending on your own language, how intensely you study, all sorts of things. But the point is, it's not instant. And if you expect it to be, you get discouraged when you're not magically fluent after a month. You might just quit.
So the big takeaway here is set realistic goals. Be realistic about the timeline. And this seemed important to celebrate the small wins along the way.
Absolutely crucial.
Can you understand, like, a headline in English? Great. Pat yourself on the back. Use the new word correctly. Awesome. Celebrate it. Because consistency is way more important than intensity. Short, daily practice sessions, they're much, much more effective than trying to cram for hours once a week.
It's a bit like getting fit, isn't it? That was an analogy used. With doing short workouts regularly builds strength and endurance much better over time than one massive, exhausting gym session that just leaves you sore and makes you not want to go back.
Yeah, that makes sense. So a practical tip for consistency was creating a tiny daily routine, maybe just 10 minutes.
Keep it achievable.
Like 5 minutes listening to something simple, maybe 3 minutes speaking out loud, even just to the cat, and 2 minutes reviewing a couple of new words, something like that.
Exactly. The magic isn't the length. It's the every single day part. Sticking with something small like that consistently, you'd be surprised how much progress that adds up to over a few months.
So managing your expectations, focusing on the process, celebrating those little victories, that's key for staying motivated and making sure you actually stick with it for the long haul.
It's vital for making the whole journey sustainable and ultimately successful.
So there we have it, the top 5 big mistakes beginners tend to make with English, pulled from all that expert advice and research we look through. Getting too bogged down in grammar right away.
Not listening enough from the start.
Trying to translate everything word for word instead of thinking in English.
Letting that fear of mistakes stop you from actually speaking.
And expecting to be fluent overnight instead of settling in for the marathon.
Yeah. And avoiding those common pitfalls. It really does put you on a much better track, a more direct, more effective, and honestly, a more rewarding path to actually using and understanding English with, confidence that grows over time.
We really hope digging into the source material has given you some helpful pointers for your own English learning adventure. Do you recognize any of these? Maybe you've fallen into one or two yourself? Or hey, maybe you've got other amazing tips that helped you avoid these traps.
We'd love to hear about them.
Yeah, definitely. Let us know. Connect with us on social media or find us through the website. And if you found this deep dive useful, please do hit subscribe so you catch our future ones. And as you head off to practice today, here's a little thought to chew on, building on that idea about mistakes being vital. What's one small, imperfect English sentence or phrase you could dare to use today, speaking or writing knowing that making that mistake is actually a step forward?
Good question.
That wraps up this deep dive. Keep learning, keep exploring, keep talking, and we'll talk to you on the next one.